6 miles from Land's End in Cornwall, the village of St. Just. For generations, Methodism, music and mining have been the mainstay of Cornishmen. But few men of St. Just are miners today.
I think is one of the biggest tragedies that was ever here in St. Just. I think at the time we lost a cream of Cornish miners in that disaster.
Years ago, disaster came to the tin mine of Levant, 3 miles along the coast from St. Just. Today, like nearly every tin mine in Cornwall, it lies derelict and unworked. But some years before the disaster, Levant Mine had been one of the largest and richest in the county. Tin was dug from levels 2,000 feet deep and from workings that stretched a mile out under the sea. Although life underground was tough, Levant Mine attracted many men from the St. Just area. The work was hot, hard and dangerous, and the miners were thankful to get out at the end of their shift. At the turn of the century, the management built a vast modern changing room. 2 miners who used it for many years, William Angwin and Bob Prowse.
Oh, it was a most beautiful building. I was about, I should say, 400 in here at least. It's a change room. We used to call it the dry. And this is where the men used to come up from underground, all wet, and then we'd make a dive for this. We maybe 20 in that little pond there and 20 in that one. And 1 or 2 around the basins with their legs up. I can't get mine up there now.
We used to turn our pants above our knees and jump in.
Mrs. used to say, don't you wash your back? When we been home for a night or 2, no, don't wash your back. Wasn't allowed to wash your back. That made your back weak. And our wet clothes, when we come up from underground and put on the dry, that used to be on these here stands here. Used to be stanchions right along, you see.
We used to have a pit with slime here. We'd take a handful of that, put it around your candle, and stick it on your towel. And then you'd light up.
Stick it on your hat. Towel.
Well, you can put it on your hat if you wish.
Then, with a lighted candle on their towel, the miners stepped onto the man engine, the machine that took them down to the workings 1,600 feet below. The man engine's action was simple. A series of steps 12 feet apart, spaced out down the great main rod. Each man would get onto his step, travel down 12 feet, get off, wait on a platform while the rod returned to its original position. In this way, 130 men could descend at the same time on the half-hour journey. In earlier times, the miners had had to climb both ways by ladder, a tremendous physical effort, worse at the end of the shift, when it took them 1.5 hours to reach surface. So the introduction of the man engine to Levant more than 100 years ago was a great boon. No photos exist of the man engine rod or of the Cornish beam engine which drove it. But one man drew and painted these pictures from memory some years ago. Lionel Ellis knew the man engine well. He was one of the drivers and remembers with affection the mechanics of the vast machine which ran it.
It was a lovely engine house, really. That was the best one in the mine. So the whole engine, the whole lot from there to there was 180 feet. I know one day I measured out to make sure.
Lionel Ellis went to Levant Mine in 1912 and worked on the man engine for 7 years.
I was just the engine driver, that's all. I had a stoker there, of course, because I wasn't allowed to leave the engine. Well, the engine would start at about 6 in the morning. That's every morning, regular clockwork. And each man would come down, get onto the step, which would then be lower, level with the solar. And that would drop down to 12 feet.
And every 12 feet, there was a step, about 2 foot square, and about 3'6" to 4'6" up, there was a handle for you to catch hold of.
Tin miner Albert Diamond rode the man engine every day for many years.
Really, it was safe as anything. A child could ride on it. And the first day I started with a man, he rode down with me, 2 on the step, you see. And after 3 days, well, you can get on all right. You had to take a candle in your hat and a lantern in your hand for a while. And of course, after that, put the lantern one side and just use the candle, you know.
Boys followed their fathers, uncles and elder brothers into the mines. William Laurie started here at Levant the day he was 14.
They had 4 male voice choirs here in this district, and most of the men worked in the mine. And when they traveled the men engine, they all started to sing, and the sound that you heard as it came up through the shaft was out of this world.
If you could stand on top of that shaft and listen, rich, it was rich. And some never used to believe in church and chapels or anything like that, yet they would join in the hymns, you know, and everybody heart and soul in it, yes.
The man engine was getting very old. Some say it was the last one in action in the world. By 1919, it was already a museum piece. Many began to fear it and to leave the mine. Harold Semmons stayed on, but his wife's brother was one of those who left that year to find work in other mines.
He left because he was nervous. He was afraid of the mine. He was afraid of the man engine because he knew something would happen one day. I think all the miners were really nervous of the engine, weren't they, Harold?
Oh, yes. Most of the old chaps, they were nervous of all the time, all the time I was over there. The fellow worked with my father for 30 years, and he left there because he was nervous of the engine.
The driver, too, had become increasingly anxious, and at last he decided to leave.
Because I could hear this thump and thump every now and then, which that shouldn't be. That was the shaftman's duty. But the manager was a sick man. He wouldn't spend much time up with me anyway. Nobody spent much time with me. I was generally alone. Well, this constant going on, I got frightened of it. So I told the chief engineer, I said, you can't put me on another engine. I'm shifting altogether. Well, he said, I don't want you to leave. Well, I said, I'm leaving this anyway. I aren't stopping here any longer. He said, all right, I'll give you a job up to Abbott. That's a little mine further up. And 2 weeks after that, the accident happened.
It was in 1919. Mrs. Murley, wife of one of the miners, was then 27.
I heard them talking a few weeks before the accident, my husband and 2 of his underground friends, and they were discussing about the man engine then. And I heard them saying that it was making a lot of creaking noise, which they didn't like. So they thought that it should have been seen into, but I don't think it ever was, because they said they wouldn't be frightened if something wouldn't happen. Of course, it wasn't interceded to, and it did happen. And it cost the mine all those men's lives. My husband was 29.
But William Murley was never to become 30. Their ordered existence was very soon to be shattered.
We got up about 6 every morning, and he used to have a cooked breakfast, and then I would pack his lunch for him, and he left home about 6:30. He would leave for work and go away quite happy seeming, they would be, in the mornings. Of course, at that time of the morning is lovely and fresh, you see.
Monday, October the 20th, 1919. Mrs. Murley, 7 months pregnant with her 3rd child, saw her husband off to work as usual.
Well, he was gone about 5 minutes, and I heard him running back, and he came back for his matchbox that they use underground, a brass to keep the matches dry, you see. And the little boy had it playing with the sign, and it was gone in under the chair, and he forgot all about it. And he, well, of course, felt in his pockets, and he hadn't had it, and he came back for it. We used to say that was quite a bad omen for them to come back like that.
I was 5 minutes walk from the mine, and I suddenly saw the half of the wheel collapse. Well, I knew what had happened, but well, and the manager and the captain were down in the stokehole, you know, preparing for a new boiler. When I told them, well, they had a fight. They went white to death, the both. They knew what had happened better than I did then.
What they knew was that the great man engine rod had collapsed down the shaft, and with it, the men.
The man engine shook like that, and then he dropped away.
Barely a minute after Albert Diamond had got off.
And, of course, I was gone up now into the dry, changing, about to change, get in the bath. Somebody shouted, the man engine has stopped. Looked out through the window, yes, it stopped, all right. Something gone wrong. Nobody coming up. Oh. Last up come Mr. Carvis. He said, my God, he said, the man engine is broken. There's some slafter down there. Here's some damage done. All right, oh, away go back now and look. All open shaft.
The afternoon shift was travelling down on the man engine. John James was with a friend.
And I was about to step in. He said, don't step in, boy. There's something wrong. And she made a quiver, you know, and I dodged back and under like, and that was that. Down she goes. Of course, what happens, the main pin on the top broke, see? And then the rod on the way down broke in half. That's what done the damage. That went right through, see, down to the 60 level. Took everything with him.
I had my 2 children in the bed with the measles at the time, and I got around quickly and did finish the washing, waiting for my husband to come. I got his dinner all under hat for him, and was there waiting, well, from 3 to 3:30, expecting him, you know. And, of course, it went on to 4 o'clock, 4:30, he didn't come. Well, I thought they might have had something broke on the ground and they had to walk up, which would make them later. So, of course, I lingered around and wondering. And, of course, as the time went on, it came to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And I still had no news of anything. And by that time, I thought there was something happened. And, of course, 1 or 2 of the neighbours came in then, and I said to them, I think there's been an accident. Well, they wanted to keep it from me if they could, but I was convinced it was something wrong. Well, of course, then the neighbours sent for my mother to come, my parents to come down, and they came there and stayed with me all the night, and another neighbour. And, of course, I knew by that time I'm sure there was something wrong. Of course, I had no official news, but then I knew because I heard them saying there's such a lot of men that hadn't returned home.
Three of us went over Levant and got in the dry where the men used to come up and change, you know, and have their baths there. We stood there for some time, you know, and the men were calling for ropes, calling for ladders, and help, more help. And men were volunteering to go down, you know.
He said, I want someone to go down, not too heavy. I said, right, I'll go. Oh, no, you're too young. I'll go, I said. So I got in the ladder. Now he said, when you get down the bottom, be careful, because he said you might step off and go farther. All right. I went down the ladder quietly, and I got to the last stave, and I looked. Oh, it might have been about 6 or 8 foot down. Look, there it was. The old shaft come together. And I could see the dead, or I shouldn't say dead then. I could see them there lying down, no movement. Presumed they were dead. Afterwards, I found out that they picked up 4 or 5 from there that was dead.
The ladders were swinging forth and back, and it's very dangerous. A moan came from a man in front of me, and there was a little piece of a ladder there. I made a grip to grip the ladder to save myself because it shook me. I was a bunch of nerves, believe me. And there he was with all the slush and everything running from the shaft right down his face and mouth. And he was pinned by his right hand and knee to the wall of the shaft, one side, and the left hand outstretched and jammed that side. He started to moan and groan again, so what I done was put some timber there that took away the water that was running in his face and chest. And he was feeling very, well, like one closed up then, went quiet. So I guess that I done something for him. Poor fellow, he was picked up about 5 o'clock in the morning. He died later.
And I had a mate. He was there for a day and a half to 2 days. And when he came out, I seen him a day or two afterwards. Well, what was it like, boy? Well, he said, it was like hell. A mass of fire. With the iron and the stones and the wood all coming down, he said it was a mass of fire. And he was there for a day and a half, standing on this 2-foot platform, or step, holding on to that. No light. He couldn't move because he didn't know whether he'd go down farther or not. He was there till someone fetched him out.
The papers carried stories of rescue and escape. One report spoke of Willie Laurie, a bright young lad who'd started work underground only about 3 weeks before and who'd had a very narrow escape.
I was 2 steps above what we call 80. That's 80 fathom. I was 2 steps above that when the engine broke away. And I was dug out 2 steps below that. So that's a matter of 48 feet. Now, the man that I work with, he was a step below me, and he was found down 110. And the man that was above me, a man called Willie Waters, he was dug out before they found me, and he was dead. So actually, I was very, very fortunate. I had 36 stitches in my face and head, lost all my front teeth, a collarbone broke, and 8 ribs crushed. But it took me 12 months before I started to work again.
We was the stretcher bearers, you know. Started to take them back. We found 2 of them where I was 250 level, 1 down and 1 up the next stage. And we brought their 2 back. We was in there about an hour and a half afterwards. Then we got sent from there up to 60 level. Went up there and brought 3 or 4 more back, dead. Then we sent them there up 24 level. And I think, without telling a lie, I think we carried 12 back from there that night. I was afternoon shift. I went down 2 o'clock. I never went home no more till 8 o'clock next evening. And we got about 12 we carried up there. And 2 of them was our neighbors here. Yes, funerals there, for days and days and days.
Years ago, when I was 12 at the time, and they were coming in here all hours of the night. And my mother, I remember my mother, she'd been dead now nearly 40 years. She was open for 4 days and 4 nights, never in the bed.
There were days, nights, rather, bringing the bodies home from the mines. So say, a damper put over the old place.
In the weeks following the disaster, feelings ran high in the villages of Pendeen and St. Just. One of the victims had been a man only just back from the war, Leonard Simmons. His brother Harold remembers the day their mother saw some mine officials passing.
My mother saw him, the manager and the mine captain, and he went out and she called him everything upon the son. He called them murderers and everything.
She said, "You've murdered my son. You've murdered my boy."
And then, from then on, I got marked. I couldn't get a job there.
They always said the engineer was supposed to inspect the mine union every morning. But I think they were working the mine and trying to get all they could out of it for themselves, the managers and things. Things was very neglected.
There was official inquiry, but it was put down to accidental. And that's all to that.
At the inquiry, the jury returned the following verdict. Death was accidental, the cause being due to fatigue of a defective part of the metal.
Fatigued metal, that caused the breakage. We're pretty sure of that. Well, it's bound to hot and cold every day, year after year, wouldn't it?
Quite a number of them was asked into the inquiry, but Captain Ellis and me was never asked. So someone said, "Oh, don't you go into the inquiry, Captain Will?" He said, "If I go, I shall tell the truth. I shall tell the truth if I go." He was never asked. Never was that.
Well, I wasn't called in the inquiry because I wasn't driving on that day, you see. But the man that was called into the inquiry, one of the miners, gave away his own father to keep his job on the mine. His father, one of them, was killed, you see. He just did what he was, or said what he was told to say. A rotten trick to do, wasn't it, eh? Yes, he sold his own father to keep his job on the mine.
They made a collection, and everybody, well, all around Cornwall and everywhere else, donated to the Levant Disaster Fund. And then it was shared out according to what you had. If you had a pension and they gave you some compensation, they took the amount of compensation out of your pension.
Good gracious me.
That's the way they done it. My mother had compensation for my brother because he died through it about 12 months after.
I wasn't more than 14 and 6 weeks, you see. Therefore, I wasn't entitled to anything from the national health or industrial injuries. And Father was too quiet. He didn't intercede in regard to the Levant Disaster Fund, so...
We had so much a fortnight then, and we were 11 months before we got any compensation for them. And then the Member of Parliament from Plymouth, Sir Isaac Foote, fought for us, and he got it. I don't think the mine intended to pay it there. They didn't seem as if they wanted to. Of course, it was a very big thing. They were 31, you see, poor men. For the first years, or when the children was growing up, it was very short. Of course, they allowed you what they called a living, but then as your children got bigger, they needed more food, they needed bigger clothes and boots. We could have done with some extra money. I went out to wash 2 days a week. So I asked for money to buy my little house, and they told me my children had to be reared. And I hear now they've got many, many thousands that will never be spent. For the last 3 Christmases, they've given us a £5 note, a little extra over the Christmas. Well, I could have done that when the children were small. would have been very welcome.
In the Levant disaster, 31 men lost their lives. Their only memorial, a poem and a list of names. Price twopence.
Yes. I forgot who they were, really, till you look at it. There's Eddie Pascoe there, and Mr. Tegir, William Andrew Tegir. They were all buried right near my husband. Leonard Simmons. Well, that's Harold Simmons' brother, wasn't it? Yes. I'm not sure, but I think that boy went through the war and came home. I think so.
William Henry Ellis, Chapel Street, St. Just. William Henry Ellis. Which Ellis is that now?
Abbott.
Oh, bless me, yes, I know him well. Little Abbott.
Little Abbott. W.J. George, Criswell Sturris.
He worked with me for a while. He came home, he was Sergeant Major in the First World War.
Samson Osborne.
Oh, knew him well, worked with him.
Chapel Road, St. Just.
Worked with him, knew him well. Lines on the disaster. St. Just, Pendeen and neighborhood will never forget the day when 31 poor miners, they weren't all poor, were suddenly called away. This fearful accident occurred on Monday at Levant, and many home is fatherless through this terrible event. The man engine was at fault, they say, whilst bearing human freight, though very near the surface, smashed and sent them to their fate.
The awful strenuous hours that pass, whilst bringing up the dead and rescuing the wounded, the thought we almost dread. There were many willing helpers came over from Levant Mine to help the rescuing parties, which was merciful and kind.
The doctors, too, must have our thanks for attentiveness and skill in succoring wounded comrades brought to surface very ill. The parson and the minister both rendered yeoman aid to alleviate the sufferers, Christian diligence displayed. Now, in conclusion, let me say, to rich as well as the poor, remember the widows and orphans, that those that gone away